Animation is done with all sorts of materials. Paper and ink, claymation and stop motion, CGI, all sorts of ways to bring these still images to life. Japan has a history of animation spanning over a century, and many individuals are responsible for its noticeable influence to the rest of the world. But very few artists have pushed the envelope quite so early and frequently as Osamu Dezaki. Dezaki himself never invented any form of animation, but he was one of the first to integrate multiple types of animation at once, something that's become integral to anime as a whole. He's infamously one of the first to use 3D animation in an otherwise two-dimensional movie, during its climax no less. It's undeniably primitive and jarring, never mind all that good-looking, but the willingness to use that technology for a major film is nothing short of radical. That was one of the only times he used CG, but it's emblematic of Dezaki's liberal use of other materials in tandem with cell animation. Cell animation is in large part done with acrylic or gouache paint, with oils or watercolor relegated to background art. But Dezaki sometimes chooses oil paints and what I think is watercolors to simulate rapid, erratic motion, or to imitate a texture like smoke or water or blood. Despite obviously being drawings, Dezaki was committed to marrying the artistry of animation with the detail of reality. To circle back on his use of technology, sometimes he'd have neon lights or TV screens painted with cells, but other times he'd use the real scan lines to have the illusion of a real TV screen. His use of reflective surfaces, his silhouettes where you can make out some vague features, distorting the image to invoke waves of heat. All of this is to make these look like real environments, and it's not something you notice at first until you realize these are each conscious choices. To add one more thing about his use of watercolor, look at these stunning particle backgrounds making each scene distinct and memorable. It could have been some stock pattern or solid color, but the texture and composition contribute to make it iconic, but perhaps not as quite iconic as his use of light. Natural light is one of Dezaki's trademarks, having real beams of light emitting from the corner of the screen. This could be sunbeams or the light coming from the top of a boxing ring. But there's also his use of bright white light to supplement the lack of detail. Light in general is a common staple in animation, used to make things glow or sparkle, something Dezaki liked using quite often in his shoujo works. But Dezaki pioneered its use particularly in censorship. In Ashita no Joe, when Joe would frequently vomit for a period of the series, instead of gratuitously animating the vomit like he does in the manga, he made it sparkle and glow to make the scene more, well, digestible. He'd do this with some moments of blood too, and it became a staple in shows like Fist of the North Star, and how anime as a whole generally animates vomit today, like in Konosuba and Hero Academia. It might even be a factor as to how anime generally censors itself with streaks of white light. But it's not like Dezaki felt limited by cell animation. In fact, he capitalized on it more than most. Despite many fans' distaste of 3D animation, for the longest time anime has strived to depict depth and three-dimensionality in the 2D plane. It's cinematic, adds realism, and heightens the material past the limitation of still images. So it only makes sense that Osamu Dezaki would want to spearhead the use of the multiplane camera. Just watching the first episode of Naki Ko and noticing how often he's using it is enough to demonstrate his commitment to it. And this is not all that easy or cheap to paint all these backgrounds and assets and making each of them move independently frame by frame. Now, of course, he wasn't the first to do this. The innovation of multiple sliding layers was used in plenty of Japanese anime before Dezaki. But what's noticeable to me is how it demonstrates his commitment to high-effort visual storytelling, even on a tight television budget. Dezaki's ability to use these materials, even ones too early for their time, shows a dedication to the art form and a desire to tell stories in a beautiful way. Anime as a whole has certainly never looked better than it does today, but I don't even need to make the "it looks good for its time" argument when Dezaki is doing high-effort experimental things like this. It doesn't matter how old that is, that's some cool shit. While he never lived to see anime utilize such realistic lighting tools, computer graphics, and special effects to their fullest potential, I'd argue they probably wouldn't be there without him making it popular.